If she hadn't broken into your office, Mr. Cavendish, your daughter would be dead. The words didn't come from a journalist, or a lawyer, or even the police. They came from the attending physician, a man who had seen thousands of cases. But that night, even he stood still, looking Richard Cavendish in the eye, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Just 6 hours earlier, the world was being told something very different. A maid has stolen a billionaire's car. She took the money. She kidnapped his daughter. But what no headline said, what no tweet captured, was the truth. A little girl with a failing heart was dying upstairs in her room. The emergency button didn't work. The nurse had left early. The father was on a plane. And the staff, too afraid of breaking protocol to do anything real. Except for one woman, Kenya Robinson, a 27-year-old black maid with no title, no authority, and nothing to lose, except her conscience. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for the system. She picked up that child, grabbed the keys to a Bentley, and disappeared into the night. What followed was chaos. Security alerts. Police pursuit. Cameras rolling. But inside the hospital, where life and death hang in seconds, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the girl got there in time. And the only reason she did was Kenya. This isn't a crime story. This is a black story. One about instinct, courage, and choosing what's right over what's allowed. So before we get into the full truth, if this kind of story moves you, take a second to like this video, subscribe for more, and stay with us until the very end. Because sometimes the person we overlook is the only one who shows up. Let's go back to where this all began. A storm, a silent house, and a decision that would change everything. Kenya Robinson did not walk into the Cavendish estate like someone starting a new job. She entered quietly, head low, back straight, voice soft. She had seen too many doors slammed to walk into any space expecting welcome. At 27, she had lived more lives than she liked to admit. Single mom, night shift waitress, certified nursing assistant, once. But that had ended the day she missed her state board exams because her baby had a seizure. That baby was now 5, safe, nuffed, waiting at home with Kenya's aunt. And this new job? It wasn't about climbing. It was about surviving. The Cavendish mansion wasn't a home. It was a monument. 3 floors of polished stone, echoing hallways, glass walls that didn't invite light in, they trapped it. Staff entered through the back. Always. No one used the front door unless they had a last name worth putting on a building. On her first day, no one asked her about her experience. No one offered a smile. They handed her a uniform. Black slacks. White polo. No name tag. No eye contact. Laundry on Mondays. Upstairs bathrooms on Tuesdays, said the house supervisor, barely glancing up from her clipboard. Do not speak to Mr. Cavendish unless spoken to. And don't enter the East Wing unless instructed. That's where the daughter stays. Kenya just nodded. She didn't ask about the daughter. She didn't ask about the cameras in every hallway, or the silent kitchen staff who never looked up from their cutting boards. She just moved. That first week, she learned a lot without anyone telling her anything. She learned which doors were unlocked, which elevators were staff only. She learned how long it took for the security sensors to reset. She learned that everyone else in the house moved like ghosts, unseen, unheard, untouched. But Kenya noticed things. She always had. Like the shoes left outside the East Wing door. Child size. Worn at the edges. Pink, but fading. Like the soft hum coming from the daughter's room at night. Not music, not talking. Just breathing. Heavy. Labored. And one thing she noticed above all. No one ever went in that room. Unless they were being paid to. Kenya did not see herself as special. She saw herself as necessary. And sometimes, that is the only reason someone keeps going. Richard Cavendish was not the kind of man who had to raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. He walked through rooms like gravity followed him. Not a wrinkle out of place. Not a second wasted. Every tie pressed. Every sentence clipped short, like it cost him money to finish them. Richard had made his fortune in energy, natural gas, infrastructure. He didn't invent anything. He bought companies that did. Then he sold them before they crumbled. That was his real genius, knowing exactly when to leave. They called him the architect of efficiency. But if you asked the people who worked in his house, they'd call him something else. Distant, cold, unreachable. He spoke to staff only when he had to. And even then, it was with eyes that scanned for flaws, not faces. Most of the time, he wasn't even there. Zurich, Tokyo, Seattle. He flew more than he lived. But in one room of that mansion, tucked into the East Wing, was the only thing he had ever created by accident. His daughter, Ellie. She was 9 years old. Tiny, pale, with hair that never quite grew past her ears. A heart condition, congenital, rare, delicate as glass, and just as quiet. Ellie rarely left her room. Not because she was locked in, but because she knew what waited outside. Voices too loud. Rooms too big. People too busy pretending not to notice her. She had a full-time nurse, an oxygen monitor, 3 prescription meds, and a humidifier that hissed all night. But she didn't have conversations. Not real ones. Her father visited her room once every 2 weeks. Maybe. When he did, it was all numbers. How are your levels? Did the doctor check your BPM? No bedtime stories. No warmth. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he didn't know how to show it. Silence had been Richard's weapon in boardrooms. But in Ellie's room, silence was just heavy. So heavy that sometimes, Kenya could feel it from outside the door. 2 people lived in that house. One ran it. One was slowly being forgotten in it. And neither of them had anyone who truly saw them. Until now. Kenya wasn't supposed to speak to Ellie. That was made clear during orientation. If the child needed anything, she had a nurse. If something was wrong, report it to the house supervisor. The rules were firm. Polite distance. Always. But rules bend when silence becomes unbearable. It was a Tuesday morning. Rain tapped gently against the east windows. The house was quiet, more than usual. Kenya had just finished wiping down the second-floor hallway when she noticed the door to Ellie's room was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked. Enough to say someone forgot to close it, or someone wanted it open. She paused. Listened. No footsteps. No humming machines. Just a soft breathing sound, uneven and slow. Kenya stepped closer, careful not to make the floor creak. Inside, Ellie sat cross-legged on the edge of her bed, clutching a worn stuffed giraffe against her chest. Her eyes stared past the window, unfocused. She didn't blink when Kenya appeared in the doorway. "Hey there," Kenya said gently. No title. No instruction. Just voice. Ellie turned her head slightly. "You clean the hallways," she said, voice paper-thin. Kenya nodded. "Yeah. I try to keep them from swallowing dust bunnies." Ellie didn't smile, but her grip on the stuffed giraffe eased. "Do you have a daughter?" she asked. That surprised Kenya. She didn't talk about her daughter at work. Ever. But something about that question. It wasn't curiosity. It was longing. "Yes," she said, after a beat. "Her name's Ava. She's 5. Ellie looked down. "My mom died when I was 5. The room shifted. Not the furniture. Not the lights. The weight of it. Kenya walked in, slow. No agenda. No fear. Just her. She sat on the floor, leaning her back against the foot of the bed. They didn't speak for a while. Just shared the space. Then Ellie whispered it, not to Kenya, but to the air. I don't think they remember I'm here. Kenya's heart cracked. Not loudly. Just enough. You're here, she said quietly. And I see you. It wasn't a grand moment. No violins. No speeches. But for a child fading into wallpaper, being seen was everything. That afternoon, Kenya left a book outside Ellie's door. No note. No explanation. And the next morning, it was gone. It started like any other morning. The sun hadn't even made it over the hills of West Nashville. The mansion, wrapped in quiet and fog, stood still like a photograph. Kenya woke up early, as usual. She slipped into her uniform, tied her shoes, pulled her curls into a low bun, and headed to the kitchen for her morning list. Richard Cavendish had flown out at 4 a.m. Zurich. Some energy summit. He didn't say goodbye. The house was on autopilot. Supervisors barked orders. Cooks prepared food no one asked for. Gardeners clipped hedges that didn't need trimming. Kenya wiped down banisters, folded towels, and stayed in her lane. At 8:45, something pulled her attention toward the east wing. It wasn't a sound. It was the absence of one. No light footsteps. No distant hum of the oxygen machine. She grabbed the breakfast tray for Ellie and climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the door, she paused. Knocked twice. No answer. She pushed it open slowly. What she saw froze her in place. Ellie was half on the bed, half on the floor, her tiny frame soaked in sweat. Her lips were dry and cracked. Her fingers curled like claws around her stuffed giraffe. Her breathing came in sharp, uneven gasps, like her lungs were tearing apart from the inside. Kenya dropped the tray and ran to the emergency panel. She hit the call button. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. She grabbed the cordless phone from the wall. Dialed the nurse's number. Voicemail. She dialed the estate supervisor. Then Richard. No answer. No answer. No answer. Her heart pounded louder with every second. She ran down to the staff kitchen, where 2 maids were chatting over coffee. Ellie's not breathing right. I need help. I need someone to drive. Call 911. One of them cut her off, barely glancing up. We're not allowed in the East Wing without clearance. But she's in crisis, Kenya snapped. The other shrugged. Chain of command. Gotta inform the estate manager first. Chain of command. Kenya didn't shout. Didn't beg. She just turned around and walked away. Fast, focused, boiling. Somewhere between the staircase and the second floor, she made a decision. If no one else was going to move, then she would. Even if it meant breaking every rule in that house. Kenya's footsteps moved fast, but her mind moved faster. Every second counted. Ellie was upstairs, gasping for air. No help was coming. No ambulance. No nurse. No father. The house had protocols. Procedures. Systems designed to keep things running like clockwork. But Ellie wasn't a spreadsheet. She was a child, dying in real time. Kenya didn't have clearance. She didn't have authority. But she had memory. And instinct. She ran down to the basement utility room, the one no guest ever saw. Tucked behind the mops and cleaning supplies was a red key tag that read, "Do not remove." She had cleaned this closet every Thursday. She had seen that key for weeks. Long silver. Heavy. The only key with a plastic seal still intact. She broke the seal. Upstairs, cameras blinked silently in the hallway. No sirens. No voices. But the walls knew. Kenya reached the door to Richard's private office. It sat behind a frosted glass panel with a biometric lock. But beside it, an old-fashioned keyhole. She slid the key in. It clicked. Inside, the office smelled like cologne and silence. Dark leather chairs. Marble desk. A globe that didn't spin. No personal photos. No children's drawings. Only precision. Kenya moved quickly. She didn't need to search. On the desk, next to a closed laptop, sat two things. A black leather money clip, fat with $100 bills, and a Bentley key fob, gleaming like it had never been used. She hesitated, not out of guilt, but calculation. The nearest emergency hospital was 12 minutes away. Traffic could make it 20. Ellie didn't have 20. Kenya grabbed both items, slipped them into her pocket, turned, and ran. Every hallway in the mansion seemed to stretch longer. Every security sensor blinked red as she passed. Invisible lines being crossed. But her focus stayed sharp. She sprinted up the stairs, back to Ellie's room. Scooped the little girl into her arms. Ellie moaned faintly, her breath raspy, shallow. Her head dropped onto Kenya's shoulder like a leaf falling to the ground. Kenya whispered, "Hold on, baby girl. Just a little longer." She moved toward the garage like a soldier on a mission. Not a maid. Not a thief. A rescuer. And behind her, somewhere deep in the walls, the alarms finally began to scream. The Bentley started with a low purr, smooth and nearly silent, but Kenya's heartbeat was anything but. She laid Ellie gently across the passenger seat. The girl was barely conscious. Skin clammy. Breathing ragged. Tiny fingers twitching against the seatbelt. Kenya's hands gripped the wheel tight. She wasn't a fast driver. She had never even touched a luxury car before today. But this wasn't about horsepower or features. This was about time. She pressed the accelerator. Hard. The gates at the front of the estate slid open automatically, responding to the key fob. She didn't look back. But back inside the mansion, security noticed. Alerts blinked red. Unauthorized entry. Office breach. Vehicle missing. She took the car, one guard muttered, squinting at the monitor. And she's got the kid. Two black SUVs roared to life in the private lot. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just quiet pursuit. Meanwhile, Kenya wove through the narrow back roads of Maid, avoiding traffic, praying every green light stayed green. "Just hold on, baby girl," she whispered, eyes flicking to the side. Ellie didn't respond. Her chest rose, then stalled, then rose again, slow and shallow. Kenya's knuckles turned white around the steering wheel. She couldn't cry. Couldn't break. She knew Vanderbilt Medical Center was the best. She had taken Ava there when she was an infant. It was farther than the nearest clinic. But it was the one that saved lives. And Ellie needed saving. Behind her, the SUVs gained ground. GPS had given her away. There were only so many ways out of the neighborhood, and they all ended in city traffic. At the next intersection, Kenya swerved hard left. A shortcut, a narrow lane that cut through an old church property. The tires screeched. The car jolted, but she didn't slow down. Red light ahead. She ran it. Two horns blared. Inside the passenger seat, Ellie let out a soft sound, half breath, half cry. Kenya reached over without looking, took her hand. Almost there. In the distance, the hospital came into view. Its glowing white entrance never looked so bright. So necessary. She slammed the brakes just in time, tires burning against concrete. She jumped out, yanked open the door, unbuckled Ellie, and carried her toward the emergency entrance like she was made of glass. Inside, the staff saw her coming, and everything changed. Kenya didn't wait for the doors to open. She burst through them like a woman possessed, carrying a child who felt far too light. "Help!" she gasped. "She's not breathing right. She has a heart condition. She needs oxygen now." Nurses moved fast. They didn't ask questions. They didn't hesitate. A gurney appeared. Gloved hands lifted Ellie from Kenya's arms. A crash team formed around the girl like a moving shield. Oxygen mask. Vitals monitor. Defibrillator on standby. Are you the parent or guardian? A nurse asked quickly. Kenya's voice cracked. No. I'm the maid. But no one else. No one else was there. The nurse didn't argue. She nodded, turned, and followed the others toward ICU. Kenya stood still, heart racing, lungs on fire. For the first time in the past 20 minutes, she breathed. One breath. And then she heard it. The sound of tires screeching, doors slamming, boots hitting pavement. She turned. 2 black SUVs had flanked the hospital entrance. Estate security. 4 men in navy jackets. Earpieces. Radios. Gloves. They didn't yell. Didn't pull weapons. They just moved, like they were following orders given hours ago. That's her, one said, pointing. Kenya didn't run. Didn't explain. She just raised her hands slowly, palms open. I brought her here, she said. She was dying. We know what you did, the lead guard snapped. You broke into a secure office. Stole a high-value vehicle. Took funds without permission. Another stepped forward. You're under arrest. Behind them, a nurse shouted through the automatic doors. Wait. That woman saved the child's life. But they didn't stop. Cuffs clicked around Kenya's wrists before the sentence even finished echoing. Cold steel. Tight. They walked her toward the SUVs, heads down, voices low. In the waiting room, a receptionist stared in disbelief. Through the windows, people pointed. One pulled out their phone, started recording. There was no context. Just a black woman in cuffs. A luxury car behind her. And flashing lights. As they pushed her into the back of the vehicle, she looked once toward the hospital doors. Just once. Not for herself. But for the girl. She had done the unthinkable. And she would do it again. Because rules didn't save lives that day. She did. 15 minutes later, Richard Cavendish stepped into the hospital like he owned the building. Because, in some ways, he probably did. Pressed charcoal suit. Rolled sleeves. Phone in one hand, silence in the other. His security team met him in the main lobby. Faces tight. Voices clipped. She's in holding, the head guard reported. Local PD is on the way. The Bentley's secured. Still counting the cash. Richard didn't blink. And my daughter? They've got her stable. They say she barely made it in time. Still no reaction. Just a glance at the clock on the wall, as if this was a boardroom meeting running behind. Then, from behind the triage counter, a voice. Mr. Cavendish. A doctor stepped forward. Mid-50s. Serious. White coat marked by years, not dust. Yes, Richard said. Come with me. They walked a few feet down a side hallway, away from cameras, from staff, from judgment. Just 2 men. One truth. The doctor stopped. I need you to hear me clearly, he said. Your daughter came in during a crisis. Her oxygen levels were crashing. Heart rate erratic. She was fading. Richard nodded once, stone-faced. If she had arrived even 5 minutes later, the doctor continued, she wouldn't have made it. Silence. And the woman who brought her in, the one your people are currently detaining, she acted fast. She knew what was wrong. She explained the meds. She got her here in time. That woman didn't panic. She saved your daughter's life. Richard's jaw tightened. She stole my car, he said quietly. The doctor didn't flinch. She carried your child down 2 flights of stairs and drove through the city like hell was chasing her. She did what none of your systems, none of your money, and none of your staff managed to do. The words hit harder than any quarterly report loss. Because they weren't business. They were personal. You should thank her, the doctor added. Not arrest her. Then he walked away. Richard didn't move. Didn't speak. He stood there in that hallway, billionaire, CEO, strategist, completely still. Because, for the first time in years, he wasn't the man with the answers. And the truth had finally knocked the wind out of him. The beeping in room 214 was steady now. Not urgent. Not fading. Just steady. Ellie lay under a sea of hospital blankets, her tiny frame looking even smaller in the crisp white sheets. IVs ran from both arms. An oxygen line traced under her nose. The machines tracked every breath, every beat. But her eyes, those gray-blue eyes, were finally open. She blinked slowly, like her lashes weighed more than she could carry. The light was too bright. The air smelled strange. And the room was unfamiliar. At the far end of the bed, her father stood. Arms crossed. Back stiff. Silent. He didn't speak. Didn't know what to say. He had never seen her this fragile before. Not like this. Not connected to a half-dozen machines and half awake from the edge of death. She looked at him, unfocused. Then past him. Then past the nurse adjusting her drip. Her lips parted. Softly, almost like wind sliding under a door, she said, "Kenya." The nurse paused. Turned. Richard blinked, unsure he heard right. "Sweetheart?" he asked gently. "It's me, Dad." But Ellie didn't respond to that. She looked around, slower this time. Then tried to lift her hand. It trembled halfway up before falling back. "Where's Kenya?" she whispered again. The nurse exchanged a glance with Richard. He felt something shift in his chest. Something old and unfamiliar. Guilt. Maybe regret. Maybe both. "She's not here," he said, his voice low. Ellie's eyes filled, not with tears, but with something heavier. Disappointment. "Seer. Moss. I want Kenya," she breathed. The nurse leaned in. "She'll come, honey. We'll find her." Richard stepped out of the room. His feet felt slow. Heavy. For a man who built empires in hours, this hallway suddenly felt too long. He didn't call his assistant. Didn't speak to security. He just asked one question as he passed the front desk. "Where's the woman who brought my daughter in?" 10 minutes later, in a small, windowless room near hospital security, Kenya sat still. Her wrists still carried the marks from the cuffs. The door opened. She looked up. It was him. Richard Cavendish. But this time, no suit of armor. Just a man, raw, cracked, and unsure. "She's awake," he said softly. "She's asking for you." By evening, word had spread like wildfire. Black Maid steals billionaire's car. Kidnaps child, flees with 50 grand. Private security makes arrest at ER entrance. No one knew the full story, but the headlines didn't wait. Neither did the judgment. Social media exploded. One photo, Kenya in cuffs, standing beside the Bentley, her face half-turned, was all people needed to decide. Another stereotype. Another assumption. But at exactly 7 p.m., something happened that no one expected. The gates of the Cavendish estate opened. Cameras lined the sidewalk. Reporters pressed against barricades. The same mansion that once lived in silence now pulsed with noise, tension, and unanswered questions. A podium had been set on the front lawn. Microphones from every major network faced forward. And then, out he came. Richard Cavendish. No tie. No assistant. No script. Beside him, Kenya Robinson stood. Not in a maid's uniform. In a simple gray dress. Hair pulled back. Shoulders squared. Hands calm, even though they trembled just minutes earlier behind the door. Richard looked out over the crowd. Paused. Then he spoke. "Last night," he said, "my daughter almost died." Murmurs rippled through the press line. Flashes clicked. Recorders rolled. "And the only reason she's alive right now," he continued, "is because of the woman standing beside me." He turned slightly toward Kenya. She didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead. "She broke into my office," he admitted. She took my car, my money. She ignored every rule I had in place. Another pause. And thank God she did. Silence. Because the systems I trusted failed. The people I trusted hesitated. And the only one who ran toward my daughter, not away, was her. Kenya's eyes glistened but didn't fall. She is not a thief. She is not a criminal. She is the reason my little girl is breathing tonight. A gasp, somewhere in the crowd. More clicks. A shift. Effective immediately, Richard said, Kenya Robinson will remain a part of my household. But not as a maid. That title no longer fits. He looked at her fully now. And going forward, she will help lead our family's new Children's Medical Outreach Foundation. He stepped back. Kenya stepped forward, just 1 inch. And the world, watching live, realized something. They had misjudged her. But she had never misjudged what mattered. The world shifted for Kenya Robinson in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, she was folding linens no one would ever thank her for. Today, her name trended next to national headlines, not as a suspect, but as a symbol. Not all the comments were kind. Some still clung to the first version of the story. People love their outrage. They don't let go of it easily. But others, they saw her. Not just what she did, but who she was. And behind the headlines, away from the flashing lights and interviews, something deeper was unfolding. Richard Cavendish made a phone call the morning after the press conference. Not to a lawyer. Not to a journalist. To a dean. A week later, Kenya stood in the admissions office of a local university. Her hand shook as she signed the re-entry paperwork. The same program she'd left 5 years earlier, nursing. The same school she thought would never take her back. But this time, she wasn't coming back alone. She had sponsors. She had a seat at the table. She had purpose. The Cavendish Family Foundation launched within a month. Mission: fund emergency pediatric care access for underserved communities. First partner: Vanderbilt Medical Center. First director of outreach: Kenya Robinson. Her job? Train first responders. Support families. Build a system that didn't wait for permission to save a life. In the evenings, she still visited Ellie. The girl recovered slowly, but stronger each week. Her laughter, once faint, now bounced off the mansion walls like sunlight returning to a room too long in shadow. Sometimes, they would sit on the garden steps, Kenya reading aloud while Ellie rested her head on her shoulder. Kenya's daughter, Ava, visited too. And for the first time, 2 little girls who knew too much about pain got to learn something else: joy. As for the other staff, some left, some stayed. But all of them looked at Kenya differently now. Not because she stood next to power, but because she became it. She wasn't a background figure anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was leading, not by force, but by example. And for the first time in her life, Kenya wasn't walking on someone else's path. She was paving her own. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones who show up when it counts. Kenya Robinson was never hired to make decisions. She was never handed authority. She was expected to follow, not lead. To stay quiet. Keep her head down. Stay in her place. But when roles collided with reality, she did what others wouldn't. She listened. She moved. She chose life over protocol. Action over hesitation. This story is not just about a billionaire, or a little girl with a failing heart. It's about how a single act of courage can expose the cracks in even the most powerful systems. It's about how heroism doesn't wear a uniform or carry a title. It comes in work shoes, in tired hands, in voices that refuse to stay silent. Kenya didn't wait for a moment to be chosen. She created one. And in doing so, she reminded us all of something too easy to forget. Being right isn't always safe. And being safe isn't always right. We build systems to protect us. But sometimes, those same systems forget the people they're supposed to serve. And when that happens, real change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the people who risk everything to do what's right when no one else will. So the next time you see someone invisible, the person cleaning the hallway, holding the elevator, working 2 jobs just to stay afloat, remember Kenya. Because she wasn't just a maid. She was the reason a child got a second chance at life. She was the reason a man saw his daughter, really saw her, for the first time. And maybe, just maybe, she's the reason you'll see the world a little differently too. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Comment your thoughts. And subscribe for more real stories that matter. Because heroes like Kenya, they're not fiction. They're just waiting to be seen.